Maybe the strangest part is that you can't remember the last time you felt something deeply. Not happiness, not sadness, not excitement, not even anger. Things happen, people leave, people stay. Good news arrives, bad news arrives, and somehow everything feels the same. A strange, quiet emptiness, as if life is happening behind a sheet of glass. You still laugh sometimes, you still reply to messages, you still go to work, still attend classes, still show up. But inside, nothing really lands anymore. And here's the question nobody talks about. If feeling nothing hurts this much, why would your mind choose it? Because maybe it wasn't a choice at all. Maybe you've noticed it in small moments. Someone asks how you're doing. You pause, not because you're hiding the truth, because you genuinely don't know. You scroll through old photos, versions of yourself smiling, laughing, living, and instead of nostalgia, you feel disconnected from that person, almost like you're looking at someone else's life. Maybe you've experienced that strange loneliness that appears in crowded rooms. You're surrounded by friends, family, people talking, people laughing, yet somehow you feel completely separate from all of them, like you're present physically, but absent emotionally. And late at night, that's usually when the questions arrive. Not dramatic questions, quiet ones, questions that don't leave. What happened to me? When did I become like this? Why does everything feel so distant? The strange thing is, you rarely tell anyone. Because how do you explain the absence of something? How do you explain feeling disconnected from your own emotions? How do you explain being exhausted when technically nothing terrible happened? And maybe that's why you started blaming yourself. Maybe you called yourself lazy, unmotivated, ungrateful, broken. Because if your life looks fine from the outside, then surely the problem must be you, right? But before we go further, hello, I'm Bub, and welcome to Hidden Signals, where I decode what you feel but can't explain. This channel is for the emotions people hide, the behaviors nobody talks about, and the psychological patterns silently controlling our lives. If you've ever felt something deeply but never had the words for it, you're probably in the right place. And if these videos genuinely make you feel understood, subscribe and stay for the next signal, because what you're experiencing may not be what you think it is. Most people who feel emotionally numb create the same story. I stopped caring. I lost my passion. I'm becoming cold. I'm just not the person I used to be. At first, those explanations seem to fit. After all, if you don't feel excitement anymore, maybe you've become cynical. If you don't feel close to people anymore, maybe you've become distant. If nothing motivates you anymore, maybe you're simply lazy. That story feels convincing, for a while. But eventually, cracks begin to appear. Because here's the contradiction. If you truly didn't care, why are you worried about not caring? If you truly became cold, why does this emptiness bother you so much? If you've really given up, why are you still searching for answers? Something doesn't add up. And maybe the story you've been telling yourself is missing something important. What if emotional numbness isn't evidence that you've stopped feeling? What if it's evidence that you felt too much for too long? What if the problem isn't that your emotions disappeared, but that they were turned down? Think about that for a second. Most people see numbness as a defect, but what if it's a defense? What if your mind isn't abandoning you? What if it's protecting you? Because maybe this didn't start when you stopped feeling. Maybe it started long before that, when disappointment became routine, when stress never seemed to end, when responsibility kept piling up, when you learned that showing vulnerability wasn't always safe, when every emotional wound required you to keep moving anyway. And little by little, something changed. Not because you wanted it to, because you adapted. And adaptation often disguises itself as damage. Imagine listening to music at maximum volume for hours. Eventually, your ears beg for silence, not because they hate music, because they've had enough. Your emotional system works in a similar way. When your nervous system spends too long carrying stress, processing uncertainty, anticipating pain, it starts looking for ways to survive. Not thrive, survive. The amygdala, the part of the brain constantly scanning for danger, doesn't care whether you're happy, it cares whether you're safe. And when stress remains high for long periods, when cortisol keeps flooding the system, your brain begins making adjustments. Subtle ones, protective ones. It lowers the volume. Not just on pain, on everything. Joy, excitement, connection, curiosity. The same walls that block hurt also block wonder. The same shield that protects your heart prevents life from reaching it fully. And this is the part nobody tells you. Your brain wasn't malfunctioning, it was trying to protect you. But protection has a hidden cost, because what begins as a shelter can slowly become a prison. The walls work. That's the problem. They keep disappointment out, but they also keep intimacy out. They keep heartbreak out, but they also keep love out. They keep fear out, but they also keep possibility out. And after enough time, you forget the walls are even there. You assume this muted version of reality is normal. You assume this distance is who you are. But it isn't. It's something you learned. And what is learned can be unlearned. Not overnight, not through positive thinking, not through forcing yourself to feel. Because emotions don't return when they're demanded, they return when they feel safe. Which means reconnection usually begins in surprisingly small ways. Not chasing happiness, not fixing yourself, simply noticing. The taste of your morning coffee, the feeling of sunlight through a window, the tension in your shoulders you've ignored for months, the emotion underneath the emotion. Because numbness often hides things. Grief, fear, exhaustion, longing. Needs you've spent years dismissing. The goal isn't to force feelings back. The goal is to become someone who can safely experience them again. And slowly, almost invisibly, life begins returning. Not all at once. A moment here, a reaction there, a conversation that lingers longer than expected, a song that suddenly means something again. Tiny signals, proof that the connection was never gone, only buried. Which brings us back to the question from the beginning. If feeling nothing hurts this much, why would your mind choose it? Maybe because it never chose emptiness. Maybe it chose survival. And somewhere along the way, you confused survival with who you are. But you were never broken. You were adapting. You weren't failing. You were protecting something that felt overwhelmed. And the absence of feeling was never the absence of strength. It was the cost of carrying too much for too long. The real tragedy isn't that you stopped feeling. It's that you started believing the numbness was your identity. It wasn't. It never was. You are not the silence. You are the voice beneath it. And before you go, there's another hidden pattern most people never notice. The reason some people feel guilty the moment they start putting themselves first. A psychological signal so subtle, most people never see it. But once you do, you'll understand years of your behavior in an entirely different way. Subscribe and stay for the next signal, because some truths don't change your thoughts. They change who you think you are.